Yeah, I'll call the meeting to order. We'll open the meeting. Actually, I understand that Mr. McIntyre wishes to make an announcement of some type.
Yes, thank you, Worship, and good afternoon, Council. Very brief, but also very pleased to introduce to you today formally our new Community Planning Division Manager. It's Carl Johansson, the young guy back there sitting next to David Monroe, which actually is interesting because one's from Abbotsford, the other's from Chilliwack, but they still get along and they'll work out well together. Carl comes to us from the city of Abbotsford, where he was there for about 8 years in a similar position, but he started first rung and worked his way up in that organization, and I think this council appreciates Abbotsford's also a very busy, high-growth area, and Carl had a big hand in that, and some of the work he produced there with his team was most impressive. So I'm really pleased for him to join us, and you'll be seeing him more and hearing from him more as he gets up to speed in his new position with us. So just if join me in welcoming Carl to the city of Coquitlam, that'd be great.
Welcome aboard, Carl. Good stuff.
First item are minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held Monday, May 14th. The recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is report of General Manager, Engineering and Public Works related to the taxi application to the Passenger Transportation Board. The staff recommendation is that the committee receive the report for information.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, we're moving this for information. I'd hoped that we would have passed this on to the taxi company in Coquitlam for them to read.
They did.
They did.
They did.
And they sent a reply.
They sent a reply, and they're happy with what's happening?
Their reply was they support completely recommendation number 1. They had, and I actually inquired of them because they seem to have supported both recommendations, but the wording on their support for number 2 was different, so I went back to Mr. Dhaliwal this afternoon or this morning and inquired of that. I haven't received his response yet. Mr. Zaborniak, did you have anything on that?
Yeah, well, Your Worship, yeah, just to, I guess, go through the two suggestions that we have. One is to prohibit the reallocation of any accessible taxis, and I think the one that that we're on the same page as them, and we know that, is that the 15% reallocation of taxis only be for those that are currently serving the airport. So I haven't heard back on the, I guess would be the first recommendation or first suggestion here.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion is, Councillor O'Neill.
Well, I believe that we got an email that said that they are opposing number 2. Because what number 2 says is that it would be 15% of the service that the company currently has a license, 15% of those 30 taxis that currently serve the airport, which would be 4.5 or 5 licenses. The email that they sent us earlier today said, no, we wanted 15% reallocation of the entire 91 which all 3 of the taxi companies, Bel Air, Poco, and Coquitlam. So that's quite a different number. And it also led me to conclude that if they still have the right to have 30 of the 31 Coquitlam taxis at the Vancouver airport, and also at the same time an overlapping right to have 15% of their entire fleet of the 3 companies downtown on certain days, that there could be quite a lot of taxis on those weekend days and A and B cruise days out of the city. It would be actually well over 40% of all the licensed taxis in Coquitlam could be either downtown or serving at the airport. So they can't, to my mind, I don't think they can have it both ways here. I think it has to be sort of 15% of the overall fleet, well, no, it can't be 15% of the overall fleet. They should really be looking at a percentage of the taxis that are currently serving the airport. Okay? So, and it'll be more than 15%. I think what they're saying is, since 30% of their 31 taxis from Coquitlam taxi cabs serve the airport, and they actually want 13 or 14 taxis to be able to serve downtown, because that's 15% of their 91, then in essence they're saying that they want about, and this is what I think we should give them, the right to have about 40 or 45% of the taxis that serve the airport, to have them operating downtown. That's what I think they want, and that's what I think most councillors would support. Anyway, that's my interpretation of what's going on here, looking at all the different numbers. So, okay?
I'm going to give you two pieces of information. First of all, when they stood before us, the reason for my questions a couple of weeks ago was because the taxi company said that they would have 15, that the fleet that was going downtown was the fleet from the airport. As you'll recall, it was the airport taxis that were going to be downtown. And yet their letter, the letter from the Passenger Transportation Board said this would result in taxis that are currently on the street in Coquitlam ending up downtown, which was inconsistent. This is the letter from this morning, their email from this morning. We agree, this is from the taxi company, we agree with recommendation 1 to prohibit the reallocation of accessible cabs. Currently 9% of our fleet is accessible, and they will remain in Coquitlam to serve our customers. We have no intention of sending them to operate in Vancouver. And then oddly, Royal City also operates in Coquitlam with their accessible taxis, and combining the two, we meet the requirement for Metro Vancouver, which is a separate issue entirely. On recommendation 2, to limit the 15% reallocation to Coquitlam Taxi Limited, our application to the Passenger Transportation Board was based on our entire fleet of 91. Our intent, however, is to reallocate them to Coquitlam fleet, which also operates at YVR. And my question back to them then, my apologies for all this, but my question back to them was, thank you. For clarification on recommendation 2, does that mean you support the recommendation? And their answer a few minutes ago, my apologies, I just got it at 1:36. Thank you for your response. Just to clarify, we support the recommendation with the 15% based on our entire fleet of 91, then to be reallocated to Coquitlam Taxi, which I don't think is any clearer.
No. And can I go further on
and
this,
I believe,
please?
Catherine, I believe, had some, she's the one that knows more about this than I do, or lots of us.
I just wanted to clarify for council that the intent of the second suggestion here was that it was of the full fleet. So 15% of the full fleet is 14 vehicles. And the intent of this would be to limit those 14 vehicles to the company that currently has the YVR license, which is Coquitlam Taxi, which is in line with what Mayor Stewart just said that the company agreed to. So I just wanted to clarify that the intent when I wrote it was that it was around 15% of the full fleet.
So that one of the three companies, Coquitlam, which is currently at the airport almost entirely, would also be allowed to go downtown, but it isn't the Bel Air and it isn't the Poco or the other one that
Correct.
Okay.
But that's not what we'd be saying. That would be all kind of like understood, but once they get the license, if they get the license that says they're going to be allowed to have 15% of their fleet downtown on these days, they also have a license that says they are allowed to have 30 of the 31 Coquitlam taxis to serve the airport at any one time. I don't think there's any way of stopping them from combining these two, and that would leave 43% of all Coquitlam taxis, that could leave 43% of all taxis serving Coquitlam either downtown on those days or serving the airport. As well, in the letter we received from McLaughlin Brown Anderson, is this public letter? Explaining, okay,
If
can't
it's
say
received, it's FYI.
Okay.
I suspect.
Anyway, it's my understanding that again, I think you mentioned this, that it's sort of they intend to take the taxis from Coquitlam, from the Coquitlam taxi company that's the license that serves the airport, but it's not written in stone there, and it won't be in that license. So I think we have to be very careful here. So I don't know if we're making a decision today or we just received this for information, but when we do make a decision, we have to...
Can we carve that?
The PTB board has advised that they can set limitations on their approval. And so the way that this letter could be sent is that we could request the PTP board to consider the application with the following limitations so that it would address the concern that Councillor O'Neill just raised. And so that was why the staff has sort of worded this in that way, is that they will consider limitations or conditions on these applications. And they've also advised that they have been following along the council minutes and information that's come forward through these sessions. And so they are also interested to hear the outcome of today's session as well.
Okay, just one final point here then. I think we should make it very clear that all we're talking about is Coquitlam taxi cab license. There are 31 taxi cabs. And I don't even know why we're involving Bel Air and Poco taxis right now in this. I think we just be very clear that this is what we're talking about. Those 30 of those 31 taxi cabs currently are licensed to serve the airport, and we should work out what these percentages are. We should say that up to 13 of those 30 can serve downtown on A and B nights, because that's what the company was asking for all. They were asking for 15% of 91, which was 13 taxi cabs. So we should be very specific and say, well, yeah, of those 30 taxi cabs that serve the airport, 13 of them can serve downtown on A and B nights and on these weekend nights as well. And I think that's, and then there's no confusion about that. We're very clear, and that's what I would support.
I'd actually go one step further. I'd say they can all serve. Those ones are lost to Coquitlam anyway. They're down at the airport. They can all serve downtown if PTB wants.
They're only asking for
allows
15.
them to. But I suspect the reason they're asking for 15% of the entire fleet is because the other cab companies in other jurisdictions are also asking for 15%, and therefore, that's the way they got up to the 15 or the 14 cabs, was by saying 15% of our whole fleet, not 15% of the Coquitlam. Okay, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you. Sorry, I heard Councillor. I didn't hear Nicholson.
Oh, sorry.
I was like, who else? So I agree entirely with Councillor O'Neill. You know, it's apparent, though, that we have three companies, but we really have one business. And I'm just now looking at the little table in the report that says 0 accessible taxis for Coquitlam Taxi. But we're also told that Coquitlam Taxi is the only company that has airport rights of the three. And we're told that accessible taxis are the most popular ones to take to the airport because they hold more luggage. But Coquitlam Taxi has no accessible taxis. And I also think from one of the lines in the email that we got that really these taxis move around between the companies quite freely. There's a suggestion that they would move them all to Coquitlam Taxi or something like that. But I actually have a whole different question going back to the letter that we wrote to the Passenger Transportation Board back in November. And if I can scroll back down to it. Page 2 of that letter, under black and red days and other special days, we say the city would need more information on black and red days at cruise ship terminals, as well as on how other special event days are approved, to provide a response regarding these time periods. More clarity is needed on how many days each year services would be reallocated and how this would affect the reliability of taxi service in Coquitlam. And as far as I can see, we don't have any response to that question asked of the PTB.
Through the chair. Just clarification was provided on page 1 of the staff report in a footnote at the base. The information received from the PTB board in response to that query was a verbal exchange and a telephone call. And the information received is that black and red cruise ship days happen 2 or 3 days a year. typically 1 or 2 days in the spring and 1 or 2 days at the end of the summer, and it's when several cruise ships have come in at the same time. So they're not very frequent. With respect to special events, they're very large special events. It would be things like the Olympics, which are very large in magnitude. So they're not listed. It's not specific, but it would be considered by the PTB board. But would have to constitute very large events. So does that answer your?
Yep, it does. Okay. Thank you very much. Although I would have been happier if the PTB had answered your letter with a letter.
There we go. The motion is to receive. I don't know. Sorry? Councillor.
Are we going to be taking, with Councillor O'Neill's suggestion, is there a motion coming out of this to saying that Coquitlam Council is recommending that if they want to have black and red days, which may be 4 times a year, or Friday, Saturday night service, that it be limited to the airport service and the percentage of that of 13 or 14 of that? Should that...
Okay, the motion is to receive. We can have a subsequent motion, but there isn't a motion to we took that. I assume that staff have taken that as staff direction, but we can certainly move a motion after the motion to receive. All in favor of receipt? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Does anyone have a motion related to this? Councillor O'Neill.
I would move to reiterate that we limit that we tell the passenger transportation board that we support only a percentage of the airport license taxis serving downtown, and it's not just 15% of those taxis. It would be 15% of the 91, which is about 13 and a half or 14. So, yeah, so that equals,
So any taxis licensed to downtown be taken from those that are currently licensed to be at the airport?
Just licensed from the airport. And in terms of a number, that would be up to 14 of those 30 airport licensed. Yeah, that's right, 13 in a smart car. Okay, so I have a seconder there? Thank you.
Okay, it's moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Reamer, that they be taken from the downtown be taken from the airport fleet. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Whew. Good. Did a lot of work on that one.
Councillor Asmussen?
No. Well, it's not German. I have some.
I recognize Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you very much. I just have some issues since it's engineering that's here, and I just wanted to raise a few issues to engineering about. One would be social impacts of construction. Now, I have some pictures here. I'll pass down that way, of construction. And I've been on this for about 4 years, trying to minimize the impact of construction on neighborhoods and existing neighborhoods. Now, these pictures show you Roxton and Sobol Street, which happen to be my streets. But the issue is pertained around in the northeast, all in the area, and I've been dealing with this. One is we have the site on the south side of Roxton Avenue, which is a 4-acre site. They stored about 10 skids of their pipes and cement stuff on the roadway, not on their 4-acre site. The company to the north of that, which is a 4-acre site, has all their stuff stored on site. And that's another issue we'll get to. But so the other issue, if you look at there, now just not storing the stuff on Roxton, they're storing sand and gravel. And if you look at those pictures, you'll see that on Friday they had finished, they had some gravel, the sand they moved. The sand was left. I looked on Saturday, came home, it was still there. I called our works yard to have it swept up. It wasn't done. Now today's raining. The issue of siltation.
Just for council's information. For council's information, this is a different set of photos. This isn't related to his.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd asked them not to be put up yet, but they're.
Oh, sorry.
No trouble.
So these are issues and stuff. Now, when I contacted engineering, they were fine with storing things on the road. But if you look on Roxton Avenue with the storage of that equipment, the company to the north is going to be doing about 20 service cuts across the newly paved Roxton, the first layer, to make their service connections. Now, when you have a 4-acre site, there's no reason why you can't store this up on your site and reduce the impacts around the neighborhood. Secondly, the storing of raw material like sand and gravel that's raining now, it wasn't cleaned up, that's going into our catch basin, that's going into our stuff. This isn't acceptable. And we have to be proactive, I think, from our engineering department to look at these issues. People live in these areas. People have to deal with these issues on an ongoing basis. So it comes back, we talked about the social impacts of construction. We've had issues on Gislason where the road was torn up for 7 months, and Galloway for 10 months, and affecting people in these areas. So a couple of years ago, I went on about construction of home builders and boulevards and mess and cleaning up. We actually passed a site development and fines and things like that, and Mayor Stewart and I went out, and I guess Mayor Stewart's been around and has some pictures here now. I've got some other issues, but I don't want to talk about also, but I'll let, since it relates to the social impact of construction and the issues in the area, I'll let Mayor Stewart go through the pictures that he was showing also.
Thank you for letting me. Yeah, I only brought them up because Councillor Asmussen, I actually had put them in my pocket on a flash drive to hand over to Jim or to somebody at this meeting. These were taken at, oops, my apologies, there's an election. I guess there's a sign in there, but we'll flip to the next one. These are taken at various places on Saturday, the long weekend. This is, at least the sidewalks are clear, but it shows that we're not getting the message necessarily to the builders, and several builders. There was Benchmark, there was Morningstar, there was a couple of others that quite frankly were not acceptable. The paint cans in the front yard, well, self-explanatory. Some sharps as well. There's food waste in those bags because you can smell it. Actually, there's one of these coming up. That's another issue entirely.
Boulevard shouldn't be there.
Boulevards used for storage of garbage or for storage of materials. If we can go back to you see that, and this is actually just up from the Morningstar site. This is one of the privates north of or east of Morningstar's stuff, but that's Morningstar's porta potty on the sidewalk. If we can go to the first, okay, next one, please. This one, the sign actually says every trade, every day, no exceptions, and that was there for 3 days. So I think we need to reiterate with these builders that this isn't going to work, and we'll go to the next one. Same one. Sorry, one more. And you can't use the sidewalk. Now this is a street that's occupied. And we'll keep going. Now this is inside the construction bin. You know, this is after we've told everybody not to do this. And if we go to the next one, it actually says right on the side of the bin. Oh, you can't see it. It says right on the side of the bin, no food waste. And the bin's actually been knocked open apparently by a bear. So we've got work to do, and that was on a long weekend, so a week ago or 9 days ago.
So
that's the bin it was in, and
if I can continue, I just have a couple
go
other.
right ahead.
And so I guess I just want us to be more proactive with the mayor from our engineering to be more proactive in dealing with these issues and reducing the impact. We understand for the next 20 years, Coquitlam's going to be a high growth. There's lots of construction, but we have to be thinking ahead and having best practices for construction companies on these issues. A couple other issues I want to bring forward.
Sorry, before you do anything else, Councillor Sikora had a question on that
Thank you
issue.
very much. You know, to me, I'm looking at these pictures, and to me, I don't know how you'd expect the engineering department on a weekend, the management to be out there to see who's storing something on the sidewalk or whatever it is. We have a bylaw department. And if the bylaws not doing their job, that's exactly where all this fits, is bylaws. But if the bylaws are not around, or they don't work weekends, and a few other things, we need to adjust that. But this is certainly not a problem with the engineering department. You can get to the owners and tell them. The engineering can only go to the owners and tell them. The engineering department cannot issue tickets. So it's up to the bylaw enforcement officers to be spending some time in Northeast Coquitlam and issuing tickets. That's how you clean it up.
Yeah.
I don't think for 1 minute that you have to say, well, the engineering department's not doing their job and blah, blah, blah. You can say a whole lot of things. I mean, let's face it. You know, what do you want, the engineering department, the general manager to be out there on weekends and everything else and not have his days off that he normally goes, or he should be somehow working till 8, 9 o'clock at night? It's a bloody joke. Come on.
Well, I don't think anyone was suggesting
No
that
one's
we have
suggesting
the
that.
director, general manager of engineering. The point I said, and I said it repeatedly, was that clearly our message is not getting through to the builders.
You're pointing, yeah, but the mayor, you're pointing fingers at the engineering department. It should be the law enforcement officer.
I actually didn't mention the engineering department once. I actually mentioned Jim, but only peripherally. So my point is that our message isn't getting through to the builders, whether it's tickets or whether it's better information or something. We're going to have to get these builders to start behaving properly. Councillor Reid.
Well, you know, I've listened to this now for 6 months. We've gone on. I think communications has been on it, trying to communicate with them. Bylaws have been up there, and they're the appropriate people, not the engineering department. And the third thing is, I would like to send out one more letter to every builder up there, and the next time, pull their permit, pull their building permit. And if that's what it takes, if that's what it's going to have to take to stop development, and they can just sit there and lose thousands of dollars a day until they can get some people with some common sense not to leave it looking like a garbage dump. And that's about what you're going to have to do. That's about the only thing that's going to help. So my suggestion would be to take a hard line, get a letter out now that there's no more letters, there's no more warnings. If we see a site that looks anything like any of these, you don't show up to work on Monday because you won't have a job there.
Yep, I'd go even further. That I mean, we're attracting bears, and this is
Sure we are.
right on a
hazardous. It's
right
not
on
only ugly, but it's not for public safety. There's everything that you can think of is wrong right here. And if they don't have the common sense to clean up their sites, then they can go build somewhere else. We don't need them. That's the way it works.
Yeah, this is right on a green belt. There's people living down the road, and we're going to attract bears into the neighborhood because we've decided to put our garbage outside.
Even a moron knows that you don't leave stuff like that lying around in bear country. I mean, come on. So that's what I suggest we do. However, the solicitor thinks would be the best way to do it, I don't know, but I think we should get some good legal advice and just move forward. We want to play hardball. We'll show that we can play.
Tasers drawn. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I'm pleased that Councillor Reid spoke up. I'm frankly tired of this. We've been certainly hearing from, for well over a year, from the folks who live up there who've been great stewards of that land. And I actually, at this point, if we can get away without even sending a warning letter, we've been doing warning letters for a long time, folks. I don't think another warning letter is going to do it. I just think we need to start saying, you guys, you're off the site. You're just off the site. Shut down until you clean it up. And all you do is 1 or 2 of those, and I think the rest of them will fall into line.
Well, Councillor Hodge.
Well, thank you for bringing forward the pictures. I mean, I think one of these is actually in my neighborhood, so I sort of see this on a regular basis, and I'm glad that we're actually talking about this. And my question would be, do we, in the construction process, I mean, this is all stuff that's going to have to leave the site, and how is it picked up? Do they just load it into a truck, or do they bring in bins? I mean, what were they waiting for? Why is it tossed out here? I mean, I don't know enough about the house construction project. I would just assume that at some point they gather it up and take it to a landfill. But I'm surprised that we don't require them to have, like, you know, bins on site, and that they put it into the bin and the bin can be closed in instead of just being left on the front lawn. I'm just wondering, is there a bylaw, or what exactly rule are they breaking other than leaving mess on the sidewalk?
Is Mark prepared to?
Yeah, sure. There's the unsightly premises bylaw, so that would be one thing that we can enforce. And I just want to say that we do enforce this. We do have a position that council approved. Bela is out there, you know, every day, and he does respond to requests when we hear them, and he does write tickets, and it, you know, it does have an impact. There, when we write tickets or talk to people, they do clean up, but then it seems like there's a time when maybe they don't do as much as they should be, obviously, and then we go. It's another wave of ticketing and that kind of thing. So that is having an impact. As far as shutting down sites, that would be the last resort. So normally we would we would try to talk to people, we would ticket people, and shutting down sites is usually, it would be the last resort, and I think Jim could talk that as well, but we don't usually get to that.
Do you know the value of the ticket?
The ticket depends. If it's an environmental ticket, it's $250. Some of the other tickets, if it's a parking ticket, I think it's only $50. It depends on the type of infraction. And sightly premises, I'm not sure offhand what the ticket is.
So where I'm at the point where we may have to obviously increase the value of the ticket, make the penalties enormous, make it so that that this stuff has to go in. In fairness, these aren't. There were places I didn't take pictures of, and that had divided boxes for wood waste and boxes for cardboard, and they were doing a relatively good job, and some sites were doing an excellent job. It was a very quick tour, but these are the ones that clearly aren't doing that, and so there are best practices. These aren't best practices.
But do we put those rules in? Some choose to follow that and separate their waste, but what, other than unsightliness, and I would argue it goes beyond unsightliness, when I see boards with nails sticking out where now we have neighborhoods where young kids do play on the weekends, and this to me goes beyond unsightliness, and I'm just wondering, do we require clean? We don't say clean up at the end of the day. Some of the builders say clean up the site before you go home, but one person's version of clean up the site maybe just push it off the sidewalk onto this front lawn. And I'm just wondering, do we actually require that they bring in a metal bin and have that on site and that everything go into the bin each night?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And this seems to be a perennial problem, which is very worrisome, because I think there has been some headway. I know previously there was a lot of abuse of the boulevards and sidewalk areas, and I was noticing most of your photos show that problem has been eliminated. I guess there is the odd situation where that's still being violated. To get to Councillor Hodges' question, under the BC Building Code and our building bylaw, it's a little general on that point. A building inspector can refuse to go onto a site to do an inspection if they feel it's unsafe. If they walk onto a site and there's a big gaping excavation without proper restraint, or they're going into a building they feel unsafe, or there's material that's piled haphazardly with nails sticking out, they may say, look, it's just not safe to be here. We'll come back when it is safe, so they've missed their inspection. And then also then falls on the contractor too to make sure that their workers as well are not working in unsafe conditions. So it's from that angle that at least the building inspectors have some ability under the BC Building Code. It strikes me here that there's a number of things happening. First, we've got to make sure, and we got to really stay on them, make sure they're off the boulevards and off the roadways with the Johnny on the spot and waste bins and material off the sidewalks. And I think by and large they have been observing that. But if they don't, I think we really need to come down on that. Now moving on to the private property, there's certain waste there that may be more problematic than others. Certainly food waste left out over a long weekend is an invitation for wildlife to come in there, and that's not a good thing. If there's unsafe materials there that could be a threat to safety to people passing by, that too should be attended to. Some of the other material, we also have to recognize we're dealing with some pretty tight sites. These lots aren't big, and there's just so much room they have for storage. So, but it's organizing that storage in a reasonable, logical way. And I think, as Mayor Stewart noted, some of the sites actually have the bins for the different types of waste, so they make an effort to organize it that way. So, I think staff need to go back and if we can get access to these images, have it's a cross-department discussion. It's certainly bylaw enforcement, and they're on to this. Engineering, I know Bela's out there consistently, and from the building permit side as well, so we just need to be making sure we're on top of it and following through.
And I guess my real question is there a bylaw that they are violating other than the unsightliness? Do we have a bylaw that says that everything has to be placed in a bin? We've said we don't. We've sent out letters saying don't leave food waste around. But what tools do we have in the toolbox that says? I mean, some people on a Friday night and they're heading out say, well, it's off the sidewalk, that's not too bad. I mean, in some respects, unsightliness can be a matter of opinion, and to a trade at the end of a Friday shift that's not looking to clean up, what's unsightliness to him? He may say it's off the sidewalk, and this is what all sites look like. So I'm just wondering, how do we judge, and how do we, what's the benchmark that we use to enforce against?
Through the chair, there's a number of bylaws that come into effect. So there's a boulevard maintenance bylaw, so anything that's on city property or on sidewalk, we can immediately ticket for those types of things.
Okay.
As far as there's a solid waste bylaw that deals with the waste, the food waste and the bear attractants, and that is a significant fine if we have an issue with that. And there is the unsightly premises bylaw as well. So those are 3 different bylaws. I guess the unsightly premises one probably is a higher threshold to enforce over, and I think there's probably a process of writing a letter or that kind of thing. So there's more of a process around something that's on private property, I believe.
Because I'm looking at this thing, what bylaw, okay, it's not on the sidewalk or other little piece, it's not on the boulevard, so this falls under unsightliness.
Through the chair,
Unless he's got food waste in there, and that may have been at a different location.
It's probably a lot of that is on the boulevard, or at least some of that would be on the boulevard.
Okay, so there's some in there, okay. True. Okay, I'm good, thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. There was some good clarification there. Thank you for that. So I just wanted to put a fine point on this. When a councillor suggests that we just pull their permit, the building, we just can't really do that. Is that correct? Even though we've seen horrific examples, not horrific, but terrible examples of untidy and unsafe practices here. There's no mechanism where somebody can say this is too much. We're pulling your permit. We can't do that, can we?
Your Worship, ultimately we can. If a building permit's been issued and through the course of construction there's a violation of a municipal bylaw, the ultimate recourse is to put a red card on the property, and all construction is supposed to cease until that violation is corrected. And obviously we use this very sparingly. It's got to be something fairly significant. It's been threatened before, and I guess if that's council's direction, we can take it to that ultimate stage. I think, though, if I could suggest, since even with the mayor's images here, which are very helpful, there's some sites that are doing a better job than others, and I think it's a matter of really conveying to the contractors and their subs what the expectation is. Like here's what's acceptable, here's what's not acceptable, and so they have clear ground rules set out for them. And if they're not meeting that, well, then we can enforce to the degree and severity as council directs.
Yeah. Well, obviously, from speaking personally, I don't think we'd want to specifically micromanage the issue. There may well be certain builders who are repeat offenders here, who are identified again in these pictures, that they've been fined or been slapped with bylaw tickets for boulevard or solid waste or unsightly, or all 3 of those, who I guess could be made an example of. And I think that would get everybody's attention. So that would be obviously the discretion of the staff here, but I think you're getting a good feel for council's disgust with what we're seeing here. And I would also like to see our communications department, which has taken to issuing kind of an informal summary of council actions, to issue something that talks about how council is fed up with this sort of stuff and is threatening tougher action against Burke builders if they don't clean up their act. So there's even a headline for you. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. See, looking at this home, first of all, the step ladder they used to build the house, they need that, okay? That wood, of course, is going to be used to build the house. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. Now, outside of that, those plastic bags, when you talk attracting bears, I'd like to know what's in those plastic bags. Is there food in there? We don't know. Nobody in this council chambers or the staff know. It was there food in there that you can jump on and say, here's a big problem. But we can't say that, okay? The paper cartons could be maybe Duroid roofing that came in. So the builder just says to the roofer, on one condition, that you take all your cartons and everything else with you when you leave. And that's probably another way of cleaning it up. But frankly, I'll tell you, that lumber there, if you call that unsightly premises, I don't know where they're going to put that lumber to build that house. I don't know where they'd put it in. What, in the front room of the house? Or where would they put it, okay? So, you know, outside of that, take that lumber away and just look at that little heap. There's some paper cartons there that, you know, is unsightly premises. To me, the only thing that concerns me is those plastic bags, what's in those plastic bags. Is it food that attracts bears? That's fine. Then you have to go after them. But if it's not, then really, frankly, I don't know why are we making such a big issue out of this. I really don't understand why are we making such a big issue out of that. You know, the fact is, you know, something's really gone wrong and they shouldn't do it. The only thing is that little block of cement is about 6 inches on our sidewalk, period. And that's it. That's it. Everything else is on their own private property. And if you go up and down in Coquitlam, drive up and down Coquitlam in some areas and take a look what's in people's backyards and front yards and other things is a lot worse than what you see in these pictures.
Thank you. It's true. I'm not sure if there was any food waste in this property. There was food waste in the bin behind there, the plywood bin. But Councillor Reid.
Well, I have to say Bela has been with us quite a while, and Bela is probably an incredibly personable guy, and he's probably works his magic and tries to get everybody to comply to our rules and regulations, if not bylaws. But there comes a time when you stop the babysitting. I mean, we're not children. They're not children. The safety factors are here. I don't think I don't care if the ladder's there or the wood's there. I do care if there's food, which we know because the mayor has told us that, and we've seen in other pictures. And the cardboard boxes, there's just no need for this. There just really isn't any need for this. And I think we're done. We have some really good builders here who look after their sites, and then we have builders that just buy 3 or 4 lots, and in they come, and they don't really care because they probably won't be here next week. We just got to do something. You know, we're spending taxpayers' money to go through the permits. Now we're going to spend more taxpayers' money to start looking after and babysitting a bunch of builders, businessmen that should be looking out for their own business, and they're not. And I'm not prepared to do that anymore. I'm just not. And if they can't come in and treat our neighborhoods with respect, then don't come here. We'll find some other guys that can actually come and build houses and really are respectful. So as far as I'm concerned, just if they can't follow the rules, if they can't be respectful, get out. I'm done.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I agree with everything that's been said around the table. This is a disgusting mess. And as Councillor Reid said, we can't be using taxpayer dollars to try and resolve this, which makes me think that we ought to be turning to the construction industry, perhaps the home builders associations. They need to come up with some sort of a resolution for this type of thing, because we're going to be building on Burke Mountain for years and years and years to come, and there needs to be something done so that to make it easy for each of these builders of homes to get rid of the plastic bags and the cardboard boxes and stuff like that. So I think that we should be turning to that industry as well for a resolution, in addition to doing what Councillor Reid's already suggested on our part. I don't know how much we've done to this point with the industry as a whole, and those who represent home builders.
Some of these builders don't belong to
Can I ask staff that question?
Anyone? Mr. McIntyre.
On one hand, it's a very good suggestion, and if we do ramp up our communication on that, I think reaching out to them would be prudent. I think, as mentioned, though, not all the builders are members of that association. It's not a compulsory thing, so you're dealing with. They tend to be the larger builders that are members of that association. But we would, if we were communicating information about this, we would certainly go to them.
Thank you.
Okay. I had pulled out I think it was a newspaper ad or some kind of a promotion from Edmonton. The Edmonton Home Builders Association in the City of Edmonton had done a program where they worked with their members, obviously, but also worked with other non-member builders to try to establish a program that says, no, the sites are not going to be like this. It doesn't cost any more to keep a tidy site. In fact, in some ways, you save money by reducing injuries and such. Having someone have to climb over a pile of garbage like that, or in some cases having residents get injured, nearby residents get injured, it's just not, on. And I think it's probably time that we start to work with one of the associations, probably the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association, on developing a program that promotes a best practices. This is the better way to do it. And if you're coming to Coquitlam, you're going to build tidy. You're going to build in a way that has fewer social impacts on the neighborhood, fewer social impacts, certainly fewer environmental impacts on bears and wildlife, because I was really, really disappointed to see this on the Easter or the long weekend, because I thought we had made strides 6 months ago, and I think we had in a lot of ways. The homes in the background, for example, face onto Harper, and they're much better than they were 6 months ago. Mind you, they're at a different stage in construction. And we've seen some other builders that simply just ignored the message, it seems, or perhaps ignored the message on days that they know that Bela doesn't work. Councillor Robinson.
So on a slightly lighter note, I think we should have signs that say, your mother doesn't work here. Please clean up after yourself.
Great big hot pink ones.
Well, I think, could you imagine putting those up selectively?
Yeah. Give me a hammer.
Okay, Councillor Reid has volunteered. All in favor of producing the signs? Apparently we're going there. Thank you very much. I suspect staff are going to come back with some suggestions as to how we might proceed further. And that's the end of that. Thank you very much, Councillor Asmussen, for bringing it up. Is there a motion to adjourn? Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Neill, all in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.